Oh, pirates, yes, they rabbi, sold I to the merchant ship. Minutes after they took I from a bottomless pit, but my hair was made strong by the hands of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing this song of freedom? Yes, all I ever heard. Redemption song. Redemption song. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. Hey, have no fear for atomic energy, cause none of that can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets? Why we stand aside and look? Yes, some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. I ask, won't you help to sing another song of freedom? Yet all I ever heard, redemption song. Redemption song, yeah. Redemption song. The song of freedom. Song of freedom. Hey, good evening from Houston, Texas, United States of America. Here is Smart Mado Ajaja, the anchor of Nigeria Now at ONN and the Nightingale Radio International, and the convener of Open Nigeria and Africa Unite, a global citizen, a Rasta, an activist with deep interest in socio-economic, socio-political, environmental, and political justice. Yes, today we are remembering a very, very important man, my mentor, our father, the father of Pan-Africanism. I am talking about no other person than Marcus Mosiah Garvey, born on 17th August 1847. Yes. Yes, Marcus Garvey was a descendant of slaves, African slaves, a buffalo soldier, stolen from Africa, brought to America, fighting on arrival, fighting for survival. Yes, he was a buffalo soldier. You know, the greatest thing this man did was, without access to the jingle mainstream media, without access to the social media that we have, without access to Facebook, without access to WhatsApp, without access to TikTok, without access to YouTube, without access to Facebook and everything, without access to Instagram, he built a 6 million strong African people's movement. Yes, 6 million. Tell me that that man was not incredible. Tell me that that man was not a prophet. Tell me that that man was not a visionary. Tell me why is that man not one that the whole world must be standing up for? His efforts from over 10,000 miles. Yes, the same United States where I am standing and speaking to you, from Africa, from North America, from Asia to Asia, and from everywhere. This was where Marcus Garvey did most of his work. He never stepped his foot on the continent of Africa, but he had this burning desire to see the black people everywhere on the surface of this earth liberated from mental and physical slavery. He was the one who spoke to the black people, telling them, emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, because none but yourselves can free your minds. And that was the work Bob Marley put in his song, his redemption song, one of the very last acts he did before he went to Zion in 1981. Bob Marley was born in 1945. 5 years after Marcus Garvey went to Zion. Marcus Garvey, from the work of Marcus Garvey was where the Rastafarian movement started. He was the one who prophesied the emergence of a king from the east. And exactly in 1930, that prophecy came to pass with the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie I, the king of Ethiopia. He was a prophet. Today we remember him. 137 years if he was here with us. Marcus Garvey was a great son of Africa. Marcus Garvey is the father of Africa. Marcus Garvey is the father of the decolonization of Africa. Without Marcus Garvey, we won't be talking about Kwame Nkrumah. We won't be talking about Nnamdi Azikiwe. We won't be talking about Sekou Toure. We won't be talking about Modibo Keita. We won't be talking about Abdel Nasser. We won't be talking about Jomo Kenyatta. We won't be talking about Julius Nyerere. We won't be talking about Nelson Mandela. We won't be talking about Samora Machel. We won't be talking about Robert Mugabe. Yes, he was the father. He was the father. Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Rest in power. Rest in power. He went through so much here in the United States for his activism. He was a preacher of the gospel of liberation. He preached the message of the Almighty God from the standpoint of an African. Contrary to what is being preached today, that is making our people subservient, he preached self-respect. He preached self-dignity. He preached about self-awareness of the African man and the African people. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, we celebrate you today. We remember you today. Thank you for your work. Thank you for all the pains you took on our behalf. Thank you for your continued inspiration, a fountain that will never run dry. Thank you, Marcus Garvey. Thank you, Marcus Garvey. Thank you, Marcus Garvey. We can't thank you enough. In 1900s, the agitation for the liberation of the African people everywhere on earth started in earnest. His message was what inspired all the anti-colonial forces in Africa to start agitating for the decolonization of the continent. Marcus Garvey, it was his message that inspired Kwame Nkrumah to demand for independence for Ghana. It was his work that inspired Nnamdi Azikiwe and others to start demanding for independence for Nigeria. It was his work in Guinea that saw Sekou Toure stood out to start asking Modibo Keita in Mali Julius Nyerere in Tanzania, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya, and later Robert Mugabe. Later, 1994, the end of apartheid. Marcus Garvey, we thank you. Marcus Garvey, we love you. Marcus Garvey, your spirit lives on. Marcus Garvey, you have millions of many Marcus Garvey all over Africa and around the world. Marcus Garvey saw the urgent need as far back as the 1900s to begin to talk about the unification of the African people. Yes, that was where Bob Marley put up another song, Africa Unite. How long, how good and how pleasant it would be before God and man to see the unification of Africa. Marcus Garvey said it, and now let it be done. Now we are at a moment. Africa is at a crossroad. Africa is in higher demand, in that need for a total unification, in line with the visions of your students who saw about 80 years ago the need for the emergence of one country called United States of Africa. They were so visionary, just as you were, to see what is playing out and the dangers that will lead to the imminence of the second colonization of Africa. They went to Addis Ababa from the Organization of African Unity. They were putting things together for the melting down of all the African borders, so we can build one country with one economy, with one network of leadership, with one currency and one military, as a way to stop what happened in the past that led to very dangerous events. The transatlantic slave trade and the trans-Sahara slave trade that lasted a total of 1,100 years of taking Africans away from the African continent, from their homestead, to the Arab world and across the Atlantic. Another event, colonialism, imperialism, and apartheid, because they saw those dangers as something that if there was no solution to put an end for a second colonization, Africa would be imperiled. And today, Africa faces a serious danger of a second colonization because the countries of Africa are mostly littered with puppets who don't care about their own people, who are willing to sell off raw materials and buy more ammunition to suppress their own people. Marcus Garvey, we invoke your spirit today to help us on the battle lines to succeed in our mission to stem the tide of a possible second colonization of Africa. Your children are rebelling everywhere on the continent. You and others must not go to sleep. come behind us, stay in front of us, line everywhere on our left and our right hand sides. We may not have all the armored cars on the arsenals of war, but we have the spirit, we have the belief that you and other ancestors who were forced out of this continent and those who fought and were murdered for standing up for their people, I hope, we pray that you line behind us to help us win. This generation must be empowered to arrest the second colonization of Africa. Today is significant. Today is extra historic for the struggle for the final independence of Africa and the African mind and the African people. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. Africans, none but ourselves can free our mind. Hey, have no fear for atomic energy, cause none of that can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We've got to fulfill the book. Whose book won't you help to sing? Another song of freedom. Yet all I ever heard, redemption song. Yes, Africans. Africans. Patriotic Africans. Pan-Africanists. Wherever you are, in America, in Europe, in Asia, in Australia, in North America, on the African continent, it's time for us to wake up and remember the stories of our forefathers. Remember how our people were severed from us, were sequestered from us, taken away forcibly to various parts of the world, where cities and institutions were built on their back, and they were kept poor. They were kept below poverty line. Remember that we are human beings. Remember that we are people of pride. Remember that we are not supposed to be the dredge of the earth. It is time, and that is why I speak to the younger generation of Africans. Our ancestors were warriors. Our ancestors were morally astute. Our religion was morality and nothing else. That was our closest connection to God. Ours was spirituality and not religion. Spirituality comes from the soul, and that provides the super connection to the Almighty. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. We must decolonize our minds. We must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. We must learn that we are a humanity of people in dire need of a unification to bring us to that point where we can build our continent and leave something great behind for our children. It is not late. A lot of efforts have been made in the past that were unsuccessful because our continent have been captured. Yes, every generation of our captors came with something new. They changed the names, but the principles remain the same. The ideology is still the same. Slavery, exploitation, strife among ourselves, self-hate, self-inferiority. Yes, inferiority complex. We were taught not to love what we are. We were taught not to love who we are. We were taught not to be able to connect with one another, even if our skin color is the same, even if our physique is the same. They built systems that emphasize differences that should not be among us. They tell us we are Francophones. They tell us others we are Anglophones. They made us less Africans than we are. And we aspire to be more Europeans and more Arabic than the Africans we are. It is time for us to look inwardly and ask ourselves questions. Why have we not been able to free ourselves from this mental logjam? Why is it that it is only we, the African people, that are always looked upon as beggars, even if our continent has over 45% of the Earth's resources? Yes, and that means that our continent is the richest continent on the surface of this earth. Why are we beggarly? Why do people who take from us come back to give us aids from what they stole from us? Africans, stand up. Africans, unite. Africans, remember the message of Marcus Garvey, the father of Pan-Africanism. Remember the message of Kwame Nkrumah. Remember the message of Emperor Haile Selassie I. Remember the message of Jomo Kenyatta. Remember the message of Julius Nyerere. Remember why Robert Mugabe was so demonized and made to look before us as if he was a monster. And we agreed that he was. Why they ruined Zimbabwe? It's time to ask ourselves this one question. Why can't we build our own financial institutions? Why can't we build our own scientific research institutions? Why can't we build our own independent telephony? Why do I have to make a phone call if I'm calling Paris? I'm calling Cameroon. I have to go through Paris before I can get to Cameroon. But when they call themselves, it's easy. It's time, African. Thank you. It's time, Africa, unite. Africa, it's time, liberation. Yes, at this moment, I thank young revolutionary African leaders led by Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, the young man in Mali, the Tiani in Niger, Faye in Senegal. Yes, thank you for standing up. We need more like that. Africa will not be liberated if the whole of African continent do not have these men. Thank you, Julius Malema. We know you were frustrated in South Africa, but I know that a day will come when it will be another story for the good of the people of Africa and the African continent. Africans, unite. Africans, unite. Goodbye for now. Thank you very much for tuning in. We love you, and always come back. If you have not subscribed to our channel or you are not following us on Facebook, TikTok, and on YouTube, and everywhere you see us, please do us a favor. Join us. Our movement, as I say, is a global movement. Movement for the decolonization of the minds of our people. Movement for the decolonization of the minds of Americans. Movement for the decolonization of the minds of Russians. Movement for the decolonization of the mind of Europeans. Movement for the decolonization for the minds of the Arabs. Movement for the decolonization for the mind of South Americans. So we can build one humanity that will have respect for one another. We have everything to make the world go round, but some people don't want that happen. We want to see a united nation that will eventually become democratized, not a united nation where 5 countries will make decisions for the whole of the world, especially Africa. No African voice in the United Nations. We want to see a change in that. Are they going to do it? If they don't do it, that is why we want more young African leaders to appear from wherever. You are in the military and you can shoot your way to power. Get it as long as you have the mind, the love for Africa. Do it. Do it. Because, like, I'm from Nigeria. Democracy is not working in Nigeria. Democracy is an act of war in Nigeria. Look at what is happening in that country. We can't have it. Yes, so we are talking to Africans, young people in Africa that have love for the continent. Go all the way. Emerge. As long as you have the heart for the liberation and the good of Africa, we will line behind you. Goodbye for now. Take care.